Have you ever felt different, but never fully understood why? Not lonely. Different. As if you were living among people, talking to them, laughing with them, yet somehow standing outside of everything at the same time. Many people spend years trying to fix this feeling. They force themselves to fit in. They imitate what others seem to do naturally. They learn how to act, how to speak, how to belong, yet the feeling never disappears. Because what they are experiencing is not a social problem, it is something much deeper. Carl Jung believed that some individuals are born with a heightened sensitivity to life, a deeper awareness, a different relationship with reality itself. And throughout history, many of the people who changed the world shared one thing in common. Before they found their purpose, they walked through long periods of isolation. Not because they were broken, but because transformation often requires distance. The story you're about to hear is not about loneliness. It is about what loneliness is trying to create. The first lie you were told about your loneliness is that it belongs to you, that it is your fault, that something in you is defective. People tell you to socialize more, to stop thinking so much, to be more outgoing, to lower your expectations. And perhaps you tried. Perhaps you followed every piece of advice, yet the feeling remained. Because this is not necessarily shyness. It is not always trauma, and it is not always fear. Sometimes it is something far more fundamental. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote that ordinary people think about how to spend their time, while extraordinary people think about how to use it. A small difference in words, a massive difference in experience. When your mind naturally seeks depth, superficial interactions become exhausting. Conversations that energize others drain you. Environments that seem normal to everyone else leave you feeling strangely empty. Not because you dislike people, but because your inner world demands something more substantial than most environments can offer. And that comes with a price nobody warned you about, because the real danger is not feeling different. The real danger begins when you start pretending you are not. There is a moment many chosen ones experience. You are sitting in a conversation. Everyone is discussing ordinary things, work, entertainment, daily routines. Meanwhile, your mind is occupied by questions nobody else seems interested in asking. Why do people become who they become? What gives life meaning? Why do suffering and growth seem connected? Why do some people awaken, while others sleepwalk through life? You rarely say these things out loud. You learn to keep them inside. And over the years, those unspoken thoughts begin to accumulate, like books in a library no one visits. Ludwig Wittgenstein once said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." But what happens when your inner world becomes larger than the language available around you? What happens when what you feel cannot easily be translated into ordinary conversation? Many people mistake this experience for madness. It is not madness, it is exile. The exile of someone who has not yet found their tribe. The tragedy is not being misunderstood. The tragedy is beginning to believe that your inability to connect means there is something wrong with you. Because there isn't. You are not broken. You are waiting. History leaves clues. Nietzsche spent years in isolation. Van Gogh sold almost nothing during his lifetime. Kafka believed much of his work would never be understood. Tesla died alone. Different lives, different eras, different personalities. Yet a similar pattern appears again and again. Deep sensitivity often comes before deep contribution. This does not mean loneliness makes someone special, but it does suggest that seeing the world differently often creates distance from it. People who perceive life more intensely tend to struggle with ordinary expectations. They cannot easily tolerate meaningless work. They struggle with shallow relationships. They often feel disconnected from social games that others seem comfortable playing. This is not superiority. It is simply incompatibility. And incompatibility creates friction. The chosen one suffers because their internal standards are often higher than the standards of the environments around them. But instead of honoring those standards, many spend years trying to lower them, trying to become smaller, trying to fit, and every compromise creates a new wound. This is where the story becomes dangerous, because loneliness changes people, pain changes people, and prolonged pain often creates a temptation. The temptation to betray yourself, not all at once, slowly. You learn what others expect. You learn which parts of yourself are acceptable. You learn which questions make people uncomfortable, and little by little, you begin removing pieces of yourself in exchange for belonging. At first it feels harmless. Then one day, you look back and realize you no longer recognize the person you used to be. Søren Kierkegaard described this as the despair of not wanting to be yourself, a silent form of suffering, one that rarely appears on the surface, because a person can seem perfectly adapted while feeling completely lost inside. The worst loneliness is not being alone. The worst loneliness is losing contact with yourself. And many chosen ones spend years trapped in that exact condition. But honesty demands something important be said. Not all loneliness is meaningful. Not all isolation is wisdom. Some people adopt the identity of the misunderstood outsider because it protects them from a deeper fear. The fear of rejection, the fear of vulnerability, the fear of truly being seen. It is easy to call yourself chosen. It is much harder to open your heart and risk disappointment. This distinction matters because the loneliness of the chosen one does not produce arrogance. It produces longing. It does not create contempt for others. It creates a deep desire for genuine connection. If your loneliness makes you feel superior, you are not growing. You are hiding. And hiding can wear the mask of wisdom for many years. The loneliness that transforms a person is not proud. It is humble. It forces you to confront uncomfortable questions. Not, why doesn't anyone understand me? But wait, what am I doing to find those who could? That question changes everything. Because the goal is not isolation. The goal is truth, and truth eventually seeks relationship. Every great spiritual tradition contains a desert. Moses had the wilderness. Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree. Jesus spent 40 days alone. The Prophet Muhammad retreated to the cave of Hira. Different cultures, different beliefs, the same pattern. Why? Because solitude serves a function. The desert is not the obstacle before the mission. The desert is part of the mission itself. When the noise disappears, something unexpected happens. You begin hearing your own thoughts, not the opinions of society, not the expectations of family, not the demands of culture, your own voice. For many people, this is terrifying, because silence removes distractions. And distractions are often what protect us from ourselves. The phone, the entertainment, the endless activity, all of it serves a purpose. It keeps us from facing questions that might change our lives. Questions like, who am I when nobody is watching? What do I truly want? What would I pursue if I stopped needing approval? Most people never sit with these questions long enough to hear the answers. You have. That is why your journey feels different. The desert has already introduced you to parts of yourself most people never meet. And that is not a punishment, it is preparation. There is a process in metallurgy known as tempering. Steel is exposed to extreme heat, then rapidly cooled. The result is not weaker metal. The result is stronger metal. Something similar happens to human beings. Hardship does not automatically create wisdom. But hardship faced consciously often creates strength that comfort never could. The chosen one learns lessons others never need to learn. How to stand alone, how to trust their own judgment, how to survive uncertainty, how to continue walking without external validation. These abilities are expensive. They cost years, sometimes decades. They are built through experiences nobody would willingly choose. Yet once developed, they become priceless. Because a person who learns to stand alone cannot easily be manipulated. A person who learns to trust themselves cannot easily be controlled. A person who learns to find meaning in difficulty cannot easily be broken. This is why some of the strongest people appear gentle. Their strength was not inherited, it was forged. Forged in silence. Forged in uncertainty. Forged in nights when nobody came to rescue them. And that kind of strength stays. Something strange happens when a person stops running from their loneliness. Their presence changes. Not dramatically, not overnight, but noticeably. People who have spent time in their own darkness listen differently. They understand pain differently. They carry themselves differently. They no longer need constant approval because they have already survived its absence. And paradoxically, this is often when connection begins. Not because the universe suddenly rewards them, but because authenticity is magnetic. Most people spend their lives performing, adapting, pretending, filtering. When someone finally becomes real, others feel it. The people who belong in your life rarely appear while you are wearing a mask. They appear when the mask falls away. The tribe you thought did not exist may simply be scattered. Searching, waiting, just as you were. And the moment you stop pretending is often the moment they begin to recognize you. Perhaps the greatest gift loneliness offers is empathy. Not the shallow empathy people perform publicly. The real kind. The kind born from experience. When you have suffered deeply, you recognize suffering in others. When you have felt unseen, you notice those who are invisible. When you have walked through darkness, you stop judging people who are still lost inside it. This is where loneliness transforms. It stops being only about you. It becomes useful. The pain that once isolated you becomes a bridge. The wounds become understanding. The struggle becomes wisdom, and wisdom becomes service. This is why so many people who have endured loneliness eventually become guides, teachers, creators, healers, artists, philosophers, and leaders. Not because suffering automatically makes someone wise, but because suffering, honestly examined, often reveals truths that comfort never teaches. And those truths become valuable, not only to you, but to everyone you touch. So if you feel different, or if you feel disconnected from the world around you, if you have spent years wondering why ordinary things seem insufficient while everyone else appears satisfied, consider the possibility that nothing is wrong with you. Consider the possibility that your loneliness has been trying to teach you something. Not about isolation, not about superiority, not about being chosen in some mystical sense, but about becoming, about discovering who you are beneath expectations, beneath approval, beneath fear. Because the deepest transformations rarely happen in crowds. They happen in silence. They happen in solitude. They happen when a person finally stops running from themselves. And perhaps that is why your journey has felt so different. Not because you were abandoned, but because you were being prepared. The loneliness was never the destination. It was the school, and everything it taught you is preparing you for the life that still lies ahead.